Amelia came back after 3 years, but she had not aged a single second. Mark stood on the edge of his property, his boots sinking into the damp Nova Scotia mud, watching the impossible unfold before his eyes. The late July heat was suffocating, buzzing with the sound of cicadas that usually signaled the height of summer, but Mark felt a glacial cold spreading through his chest. 10 yards away, emerging from the dense spruce tree line, was his daughter. She was wearing the yellow sundress, the same one, not a similar dress, not a replacement bought to comfort grieving parents. It was the dress. Mark remembered the specific stitching error on the hem that his wife, Sarah, had fretted over the morning of the festival in 2007. He saw the yellow ribbon tied in her hair, the loops perfectly symmetrical, untouched by wind, rain, or the passage of time. Sarah let out a sound that was not human, a raw, tearing shriek of disbelief and overwhelming joy, and sprinted across the yard. She fell to her knees, grasping the child, burying her face in the girl's neck. Mark did not move. He could not. His brain was trying to process a mathematical error in reality. Amelia vanished when she was 7. 3 years had passed. She should be 10. She should be taller, her face leaner, her baby teeth gone. But the child standing in the embrace of her weeping mother was 7 years old. Exactly 7. To the day. To the minute. Daddy! The voice was small, melodious, and terrifyingly familiar. Amelia looked over Sarah's shaking shoulder, locking eyes with Mark. Her eyes were wide, brown, and clear. Too clear. There was no fear in them. No trauma. No confusion. Just a placid, waiting stillness. Mark forced his legs to move. He walked toward them, the instinct to protect warring with a primal biological alarm ringing in his hindbrain. He knelt beside his wife. He reached out and touched Amelia's arm. Her skin was cool, smooth, and clean. There was no grime from the forest. No scratches from briars. She smelled of strawberry shampoo, the bottle that had been sitting dusty in the bathroom cabinet for 36 months. Amelia, Mark whispered. I'm back, Daddy, she said. She did not cry. She did not cling to him. She simply stood there, allowing herself to be held, like a doll waiting to be placed on a shelf. The next 6 hours were a blur of flashing lights and bureaucratic chaos. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived, turning the quiet home into a crime scene processing unit. Mark sat in the kitchen watching the flurry of activity. He answered the questions mechanically. Yes, it's her. Yes, we resure. No, I do not know where she was. Officer Halloway, a man who had led the search 3 years ago, looked pale. He stood in the doorway of the living room, watching Amelia color in a book she had abandoned the day she disappeared. She held the crayon with the same clumsy grip of a first grader. Mark, Halloway said, his voice low, we need to take her to Yarmouth. For tests. The physical state. It does not make sense. She's my daughter, Sarah interjected, her voice sharp, bordering on hysterical. She was gripping Amelia's shoulder, her knuckles white. She's home. That's all that matters. Do not you dare talk about her like she's a specimen. Sarah, look at her, Mark said, the words tasting like ash. Look at the dress. It's clean. It's been 3 years. How is the dress clean? She was taken care of. Sarah snapped, her eyes wild. Someone took care of her, and now she is back. Mark looked at Amelia. She did not react to the shouting. She kept coloring a blue sky over a green field. The crayon did not stray outside the lines. Not once. The choice hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The police wanted to keep her in custody for observation. Child Protective Services was already on the phone. Logic dictated that this child was an anomaly, a medical impossibility that needed to be studied, questioned, and understood before being reintegrated into a home she had been absent from for a significant percentage of her life. But then Amelia looked up from her coloring book. She looked at Mark. She smiled, and for a second, it looked exactly like the smile she gave him when he bought her ice cream. It was a weaponized memory. I want to stay with you, she said softly. Mark looked at Sarah's desperate, fragile face. He knew that if he let the police take Amelia away tonight, Sarah would shatter. Her mind, held together by duct tape and hope for 3 years, would finally break. "She stays," Mark said, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. He ignored the bile rising in his throat. "She stays here tonight. We'll bring her to the hospital in the morning. But tonight, she sleeps in her bed." Holloway hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll have a cruiser parked at the end of the driveway. All night. Do not leave the property." The police left. The house fell silent. Sarah went into a frenzy of mothering, cooking mac and cheese, drawing a bath, finding pajamas. Amelia moved through the rituals with fluid compliance. She ate the food. She took the bath. She put on the pajamas. Mark stood in the doorway of her bedroom. It was a shrine he had not touched in 3 years. The dust had been wiped away by Sarah earlier that evening. Amelia climbed into the bed, pulling the duvet up to her chin. "Good night, sweetie," Sarah whispered, kissing her forehead, tears still streaming down her face. "Mommy is right here. I am never letting you go again." "Good night, Mommy," Amelia said. Sarah left the room, collapsing into the hallway sobbing with relief. Mark lingered. He stepped into the room. The night light cast long, strange shadows against the wall. "Amelia," Mark said. "Yes, Daddy? Where were you?" "Really?" Amelia stared at him. The shadows seemed to pool in her eyes. "The glass house," she said. "In the woods. The tall man said I had to wait until you stopped looking." "We never stopped looking," Mark said. "Yes, you did," Amelia corrected him. Her tone was devoid of accusation. It was just a statement of fact. "You stopped walking in the woods. You stopped calling. So the door opened." Mark felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He backed out of the room. "Go to sleep." He closed the door, leaving it cracked open an inch. He went to his own bedroom, but he did not sleep. He lay awake, listening to the house settle. At 3 a.m., the silence was absolute. No rustle of sheets. No sound of a child turning over. Driven by a gnawing anxiety, Mark got up. He crept down the hallway. He pushed Amelia's door open. She was lying exactly where they had left her, on her back. The duvet was pulled to her chin. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. She was not blinking. Mark held his breath, watching her chest. It did not rise. It did not fall. He waited 5 seconds. 10. 20. Finally, her chest hitched. A shallow, mechanical intake of air, before settling back into total stillness. She turned her head slowly on the pillow, the friction of the fabric making a sound like dry leaves. "I do not sleep anymore, Daddy," she whispered. "It's a waste of time." The fall into madness was not sudden. It was a slow, grinding descent that began the next morning at the Yarmouth Regional Hospital. Mark stood in the corner of the examination room, arms crossed, watching Dr. Evans review the charts. The doctor was a family friend, a man who had treated Amelia for chickenpox and scraped knees. Now, he looked at the tablet in his hands as if it were an alien artifact. "Mark, Sarah, I do not know how to tell you this," Dr. Evans said, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I've run the panel twice. I sent the blood to Halifax for a rush confirmation, but the local markers are clear." "Is she sick?" Sarah asked, clutching Amelia's hand. Amelia was sitting on the exam table, her legs dangling, swinging back and forth in a perfect, metronomic rhythm. "No," Evans said. "She's perfect. That's the problem. Sarah, her bone density is that of a 7-year-old. Her dental development has not shifted a millimeter since her last checkup in 2007. There is no scar tissue from the 3 years she was missing. No sun damage. No calluses on her feet. It's like she was put in cryostasis. So she is healthy," Sarah said, grasping at the only word she understood. "She has not grown, Sarah." Mark interrupted, his voice hard. "Not an inch. That's not healthy. That's impossible. Stress can stunt growth," Sarah snapped, turning on him. She was traumatized. Stress does not stop fingernails from growing. Evans said quietly. Mark is right. Biologically, this child is 7 years old. But chronologically, she is 10. And there is something else. What? Mark asked. Her heart rate, Evans said, lowering his voice. S resting at 35 beats per minute. That S comatose levels. But she is sitting right there talking to us. They took her home. There was nothing else to do. The medical community was baffled, but they could not hold a child prisoner because her vitals were too efficient. The drive back was silent. Amelia stared out the window, watching the trees blur by. Over the next week, the atmosphere in the house shifted from celebratory to oppressive. The air felt heavy, charged with static. Sarah was living in a fantasy, cooking elaborate meals that Amelia ate with mechanical efficiency. Sarah bought new clothes size 10, assuming Amelia would hit a growth spur, but they hung off the girl's small frame like shrouds. Mark watched. He became a spy in his own home. He noticed the details Sarah refused to see. He noticed that Amelia did not sweat, even when the temperature spiked to 30 degrees. He noticed that the family dog, a golden retriever named Buster who had adored Amelia, now refused to enter the same room as her. When Amelia walked into the kitchen, Buster would whine and scratch at the back door, desperate to escape. And then there was the glass house. Amelia spoke of it constantly, but only when prompted, and always with that same flat, affectless tone. It was in the clearing, she told Mark one evening while he was trying to fix a leaky faucet. She was standing right behind him. He had not heard her approach. There are no glass houses in the woods, Amelia, Mark said, tightening a bolt with trembling hands. You could not see it because you did not look right, she said. The walls were clear. We could see the trees, but the trees could not touch us. The tall man kept the bad things out. Who is the tall man? Mark asked, turning to face her. The keeper, she said. He makes things. He fixes things that are broken. Were you broken? I was lost, she said. So he made me safe. He made me so I would not change. Changing hurts. Growing up hurts. He said I can stay 7 forever. Mark dropped the wrench, clattered loudly on the tile floor. Amelia did not flinch. She stared at the wrench, then at Mark. You re-scared, she observed. Yes, Mark admitted. I am. You should not be. I'm better now. The breaking point came 2 days later. Sarah was in the garden, and Mark was in the kitchen cutting vegetables for dinner. The knife slipped. It was a nasty cut, slicing deep into his thumb. Blood welled up, bright and fast, dripping onto the cutting board. Damn it, Mark hissed, reaching for a towel. He felt a presence at his elbow. Amelia was there. She was not looking at his face. She was looking at the blood. She reached out a finger. Do not touch it, sweetie, it is dirty, Mark said. Amelia ignored him. She pressed her finger into the pool of blood on the cutting board. She lifted her finger and examined the red liquid, tilting her head. Then, slowly, she put her finger in her mouth. She tasted it. Her expression did not change. No disgust. No metallic wince. Just processing. It is salty, she said. And warm. Why is it warm? Because I'm alive, Amelia, Mark whispered, backing away from her. Because I'm human. She looked at him, and for the first time her mask slipped. A flicker of genuine confusion crossed her face. But the inside is supposed to be cold, she said. Like the clay. What clay? Mark demanded. The clay in the glass house, she said. Where the copies are made. Mark grabbed her shoulders. He shook her harder than he meant to. Where is it? Where is the house? Amelia did not cry out. She did not resist. She pointed toward the window, toward the deep woods behind their property. Past the old creek, she said. Where the birch trees turn into pine. There is a circle. That S where the door was. Mark let her go. She stumbled back slightly but regained her balance instantly. He looked at her, really looked at her and saw the hollowness. The lights were on, but nobody was home. This was not his daughter. This was a biological recording on a loop. He grabbed his jacket. He grabbed the flashlight. And then, acting on a terrified impulse, he went to the garage and grabbed the shovel. "Mark!" Sarah called from the patio door. "Where are you going?" "I need to check something," Mark said, not looking at her. Stay with her. Do not let her out of your sight." "Mark, you re-scaring me." "I'm scared too, Sarah," he said. "I'm scared too." The forest was rapidly losing light. The canopy of spruce and pine knit together overhead, blocking out the dying sun and plunging the trail into a premature twilight. Mark moved with a frantic energy, stumbling over roots, the shovel acting as a walking stick and a weapon. He knew the woods. He had grown up here. He knew the creek Amelia mentioned. He knew the transition from birch to pine. It was about 2 miles in, a dense, untraveled section of the island that tourists never found. As he walked, the silence of the forest deepened. The birds stopped singing. The wind died down. It was as if the natural world was holding its breath, stepping back to allow him passage into something it wanted no part of. He reached the creek. It was dry, a bed of gray stones. He crossed it and pushed through a thicket of thorns that tore at his jeans. Beyond the thicket, the trees changed. The white, peeling bark of the birches gave way to the dark, towering pines. The ground beneath his feet became spongy with layers of dead needles. And there it was, the circle. It was not a structure. There was no glass house. It was a natural clearing, a perfect circle of earth where nothing grew. No grass, no saplings, not even moss. Just dark, packed earth surrounded by a wall of ancient pines. Mark stood at the edge of the circle, panting. The air here was colder, carrying a scent that was not pine or mud. It smelled like ozone and formaldehyde. "Where is it?" Mark whispered to the empty air. "Where is the house?" He stepped into the clearing. The ground felt wrong under his boots. It was not solid. Felt hollow, disturbed. He remembered Amelia's words. The door opened. He walked to the center of the clearing. He looked down. The earth here was slightly different in color. Darker, as if it had been turned over recently. But not 3 years ago. It looked like it had been turned over weeks ago, or maybe days. Mark jammed the spade of the shovel into the dirt. It sank in easily. Too easily. He began to dig. He did not know what he was looking for. A hatch? A trapdoor leading to an underground bunker where a kidnapper had kept his daughter in a suspended state? That was the only logical explanation that fit the medical impossibility. A lab. A basement. He dug for 10 minutes, sweat pouring down his face, mixing with the dirt. The hole grew deeper. 2 feet. 3 feet. His shovel hit something. Not metal. Not wood. It hit something soft that crunched. Mark froze. He knelt down, discarding the shovel. He reached into the hole with his bare hands. The soil was cold, freezing cold. He brushed away the loose dirt. He saw yellow. It was fabric. Dirty, stained, partially disintegrated fabric. He pulled at it. It gave way, revealing what was underneath. Mark screamed. It was a short, sharp sound that was swallowed instantly by the trees. He was looking at a ribcage. Small, delicate white bones poking through the rot of a yellow sundress. He frantically brushed away more dirt, his mind fracturing. He found the skull. It was small. The jaw was slack. Tufts of brown hair were still attached to the scalp. And tied around a lock of that hair, preserved by the synthetic material, was a yellow ribbon. Mark scrambled back, crab walking away from the hole, gasping for air. The skeleton was old. The clothes were rotted. The flesh was gone. This child, his child, had died 3 years ago. She had not been kidnapped. She had not been in a glass house. She had wandered off, perhaps fallen, perhaps succumbed to exposure, and died right here in this clearing. But if Amelia was dead, if her bones were lying in this hole, then what was in his house? Mark stared at the grave. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The thing in his kitchen. The thing that did not sweat. The thing with the resting heart rate of a coma patient. The thing that tasted his blood and called it warm. It was not Amelia. It was a copy. A mimic. Amelia had said it herself. The clay in the glass house, where the copies are made. Something in these woods, something ancient and not human, had found his daughter's body. It had taken her genetic code, her image, her memories, and it had grown a replacement. Perfect biological shell. But it did not understand time. It did not understand that children grew. It just created a static image of what it found. Mark looked at the shovel. He looked at the darkening path back to his house. He had to go back. He had to tell Sarah. He had to call the police. They had to destroy the thing in his house. He stood up, his legs shaking. He looked down at the bones one last time. If I tell Sarah, he thought, it will kill her. The thought stopped him cold. Sarah was barely holding on. Her joy, her frantic, manic happiness over the last week. It was the only thing keeping her alive. If Mark walked in holding this muddy, rotted yellow dress and told her that the little girl eating cereal in their kitchen was a monster, Sarah would end her life. He knew it with absolute certainty. Mark looked at the house in the distance, through the trees. He imagined the scene. The police coming. The autopsy. The second funeral. The empty room. He looked at the hole. He picked up the shovel. Mark did not run back to the house. He worked. He worked for an hour as the night fully descended. He filled the hole. He packed the dirt down. He gathered pine needles and dead leaves, scattering them over the fresh earth until the circle looked undisturbed again. He buried his daughter for the second time, and with every shovel of dirt, he buried a piece of his own humanity. When he was done, he stood in the darkness. He felt a strange, hollow calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, leaden resolve. He knew the truth now. The unknown was always scarier than the known. He knew what was in his house. It was not a ghost. It was not a demon. It was a biological predator, or perhaps a parasite using love as camouflage. Mark walked back through the woods. He did not use the flashlight. He let the darkness guide him. He reached the creek, washed the mud from his hands and face in the dry bed's remaining stagnant pools, and wiped them on the grass. He approached the house. The lights were on. It looked warm, inviting. A picture of suburban normalcy. He opened the back door and stepped into the kitchen. Sarah was at the sink washing dishes. She turned when he entered. She looked tired but happy. A genuine smile. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked. Mark paused. He looked at his hands. They were clean enough. "No," Mark said. Just checked the old tree stand. It was empty. "Well, you missed dinner," Sarah said. "Amelia is in the living room watching TV. She has been waiting for you." Mark walked into the living room. The TV was playing a cartoon, bright colors flashing across the screen. Amelia was sitting on the sofa, her legs straight out in front of her. She was not watching the TV. She was watching the hallway, watching for him. When Mark entered, she turned her head. The movement was smooth, too smooth. She looked at him with those clear brown eyes. She tilted her head, just slightly. She knew. She could smell the decay on him. She could smell the soil of the clearing. She could smell her own bones on his clothes. Mark stood his ground. He did not flinch. He looked at the creature wearing his dead daughter's face, and he made a decision that would damn him forever. He walked over to the sofa and sat down next to it. "Hey, sweetie," Mark said. His voice did not shake. The thing stared at him. It seemed to be calculating, processing this new data. The father knows. The father found the source. The father returned. "Hey, Daddy," it said. "Did you have a good day?" Mark asked. "Yes," it said. "I played." "Good," Mark said. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind its ear. The hair felt like silk. The ear was cool to the touch. "I'm glad you re-home." A slow smile spread across the creature's face. It was not Amelia's smile anymore. It was wider. It showed too many teeth. It was a smile of complicity. A smile that said, "We have a deal." It leaned its head against Mark's shoulder. Mark put his arm around it. He felt the slow, thudding rhythm of its heart 35 beats per minute. From the kitchen, Sarah began to hum a lullaby. Mark stared at the reflection in the dark window opposite the sofa. He saw himself a man holding a monster. He tightened his grip. "I love you, Amelia," he lied. "I know," the thing replied. "That's why I'm here." Mark closed his eyes, listening to the slow, heavy heart of the mimic, and waited for the morning that he hoped would never come.